Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. Once again, it is time for the Sunday sum up, so let's go through this recent week in ridiculousness, shall we? First up, I saw this one which, if we're all not bothered by this, we need to seriously reevaluate things. Someone pointed out that they've come up with a new word for desperately working multiple jobs as a millennial. Polyworking, the new job trend graduates are gunning for. The job juggle. Gen Z and millennial employees embrace the concept of polywork. Oh my god, this is not embracing anything. This is literally out of desperation, you capitalist fucks. No one's gunning for this. No one wants it. It's just that so many jobs pay jack fuck all, and so we have to work multiple jobs. This is the worst form of manufacturing consent. Welcome to the Sunday Sum Up, everyone. Once again, we're just getting started. And on the subject of jobs and pay and, everyone's talking about wealth taxes, etc. now. Well, we should be talking about it more. Unfortunately, we aren't because we live in hell. But there's a lot of people out there simping for billionaires and capitalists thinking, oh, everyone's talking about raising taxes on the wealthy. Does that mean me with my, 5-bedroom suburban mansion? Am I going to be targeted? Like, on the one hand, yeah, millionaires are on thin fucking ice. But as this TikTok brilliantly puts it, it's really less about, people in the suburbs who are fearful of everything and more about the wealthiest fraction of the 1% that is hoarding the vast amounts of global wealth. That's where the fight should be, and this person brilliantly points out how and why.
If you have $2 million, you're kind of poor, relatively speaking. Let's make a chart about this. Behold, our humble chart. Each of these squares is $5 billion. Down here is a person with $0, dead broke. And up here is the world's richest person, Jeff Bezos, with $190 billion. Here's you. Statistically speaking, give or take a couple $100,000 of net worth. Here is where the 1% starts, just above you, at a minimum of $4.5 million net worth. Here's Kanye at $6.5 billion of net worth. Most famous people are less rich than Kanye, for example. Trump, Oprah, Jay-Z, Floyd Mayweather, LeBron James, Kylie Jenner, Mark Cuban, that guy from the Wolf of Wall Street in real life, and every politician that you've ever heard of except for Michael Bloomberg, who at $55 billion is much closer to having no money at all than he is to having Jeff money. At a whole nother level is Elon Musk at $180 billion, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg at $132 billion. 99% of Americans are between here, and 17 million Americans are below zero with a negative net worth. I bring this up because every time I'm like, we should tax the rich, somebody with a Peloton and a 3-car garage is like, do you mean me, John? No, I do not. You're poor. Again, relatively. Your life here is a lot different than somebody's life down here. We are all poor compared to right here. All I'm saying is that we can vote together to rebuild the country and make the super rich pay for it. After all, this is the only country on earth where you can make that kind of money semi-legally.
Kanye is a billionaire, which means he has more money than the vast majority of us will ever have. And relatively speaking, compared to Jeff Bezos, he is poor by comparison. That's the kind of wealth we're talking about. Not someone with a 3-car garage, as the TikToker points out. And then in related economic news, I want to quickly go overseas for a second. Back to Britain, where once again, Brexit is a thing that people are still unfortunately dealing with. And this video is a little frustrating, but also very sad and unfortunate.
Chris, I don't know where you were personally on the issue of being in, yes or no to leaving the European Union. But certainly, those advocating Brexit held up fishing as an example of an industry that could immediately benefit.
It's been well mooted. Fishing was the poster boy of the Brexit campaign, and the majority of fishermen, myself included, voted to leave the EU. Now, we didn't vote for what we're currently seeing. We feel that the deal Boris basically secured at the end of December, 11th hour sort of diplomatic rushing here and there. It was an absolute. It's created shambles within the fishing industry, wider than what the actual oyster fishery that I'm connected in. I mean, it just seems that everything was left to the last minute. This is not what we voted for. What we voted for was a better deal than what we've actually got now. It seems like Boris has caved in big time on the fishing industry, and we seem to be a bit of well, a bit of collateral damage to the deal that he secured. Is whether George says that the goalposts were changed, the net result is we're still stuck. We're still stuck, not be able to go fishing. And the whole entire fleet of sailboats and oyster punts are now tied up, have been for over a month, with no income whatsoever. It's an absolute, and not only that, the merchants as well, who rely on this fishery for their living, for their businesses. They also are caught up as well. They're linked in the same manner as what we are.
That's a fisherman who openly admits that he and many others he knew voted for Brexit, but they didn't vote for this. Unfortunately, you did. And yet many people that supported Brexit called the people who were pointing this out hypocrites or, liars, or they said it was part of Project Fear. Oh, you're just, making it, you're clearly in bed with the Europeans because you're part of the elites. This is fear mongering. It won't be that bad. Brexit will make us stronger. Well, clearly it hasn't. And so that's one aspect in which this is unfortunate, but there's another aspect that's also arguably even more unfortunate. This fisherman also talks about how, Boris seems to have just kind of given us up at the negotiating table. This negotiation was basically written in stone from the start, as many Remainers tried to point out. The deal that Boris was trying to get was basically unworkable, and that's why there's so many problems right now happening in Britain. We've talked about it before with, lack of food on shelves, the increasing, seemingly a return of the Troubles in Northern Ireland because they just moved the border into the sea and Unionists are pissed. And now, sure enough, there's massive fishing fleets and they, still don't have access to various fishing and there's still a lot of red tape. It's almost like, dude, you and other fishermen were lied to. You were lied to by people you voted to support. So yeah, I'm frustrated because, geez, this all was so avoidable if people hadn't been misled, but unfortunately they were. And now Britain is unfortunately reaping what it's sown. And hardworking people like this fisherman who were led astray and many others in his community and his industry are suffering because they were lied to and misdirected by assholes like Boris Johnson. Oh, and in related dystopia news and coming back to North America for a hot second,
This is the Minnesota State Patrol. The permit issued for this event expired at 10 p.m. yesterday, Thursday, August 26th. In order to prepare for future permitted events, you need to leave the cordoned off area immediately. Please make your way to the inner circle of troopers, and you will be escorted to the outside of the...
That is so dystopian. What the fuck? So, gentle reminder that the Line 3 fight is actually super important and no one's covering it. As some of you will hopefully remember, I've actually talked about Line 3 a few times, once specifically in a video. I'll try and find it and link it up here. And all about how the fight over Line 3 and Line 5 are actually really crucial because those could potentially kill the oil and gas industry in Canada and also potentially kill the concept of Canada itself because that will just piss off Alberta and Alberta might just try and separate. And so, of course, no one in the Canadian media wants to cover it because why stir the pot? Plus, we got the election to focus on right now. And in America, well, who really cares about Canada? And also, the oil and gas sector is still really big there, and no one wants to talk about how integrated the economies of Canada and the United States are, nor do they want to talk about how if we want actual meaningful climate action, we need to actually stop these pipelines. And that's why you see the water defenders being encircled by a massive amount of Minnesota State Police. And then there's that, from a dystopian video game clarion call going out. It is so wild. So yeah, support the fight to stop Line 3. And please make some noise about this because the media sure as hell isn't doing anything. And I'll come back around to the media in a second, but there's another unfortunate thing I want to talk about. There's this video from CBS News that I saw on Twitter that's really unfortunate due to a variety of reasons, and so the rest of this video is largely going to be focused on the pandemic, the current fourth wave fueled by the Delta variant, and assholes refusing the vaccine and taking Ivermectin for some reason. Because, you know, taking toxic horse dewormer is totally safer than a vaccine. But here's the thing, right? These selfish pricks and these irresponsible assholes are resulting in deaths that are entirely preventable, and not just from COVID. U.S. Army veteran Daniel Wilkinson of Texas died of a treatable illness because the COVID crisis left him without an available ICU bed, even though he lives 3 houses down from an emergency room and 60 miles away from some of the greatest healthcare facilities in the world. So here's that video that I've edited just to make it a bit more clear and succinct.
This was U.S. Army veteran Daniel Wilkinson on an emergency room stretcher shortly before he died.
He loved his country. He served 2 deployments over in Afghanistan, came home with a Purple Heart, and it was a gallstone that took him out.
Last Saturday, Wilkinson's mother, Michelle Puget, rushed him to Belleville Medical Center, just 3 doors down from their home. But for Wilkinson, help was still too far away. ER Dr. Hassan Kakli treated Wilkinson, and he discovered that he had gallstone pancreatitis, something the Belleville Hospital was not equipped to treat.
If that stone doesn't spontaneously come out and doesn't resolve itself, that fluid just builds up, backs up into the liver, backs up into the pancreas, and starts to shut down those organs. His blood work even showed that his kidneys were shutting down.
This went from life-threatening to...
He's dying.
In front of you?
Yes.
Wilkinson needed a higher level of care, but with hospitals across Texas and much of the South overwhelmed with COVID patients, there was no place for him.
We're making phone calls. Sorry. Places had the specialist to do the procedure, but because of how sick he was, they didn't have an ICU bed to put him. So then I'm at my computer and I'm just like scratching my head. I'm like, and I get this thought in my head. I'm like, well, what if I put this on Facebook or something? Maybe someone can help out. One doc messaged me, hey, I'm in Missouri. Last time I checked, we have ICU beds. We can do this. Call this number. The next guy messages me. He's a GI specialist. He goes, I'm in Austin. I can do his procedure. Get him over to me. I said, okay, great, let's go. He texts me back 5 minutes later. I'm sorry. I can't get administrative approval to accept him. We're full.
For nearly 7 hours, Wilkinson waited in this bed.
I had that thought in my head is like, I need to get his mother here right now. I told her, I said, if he doesn't get this procedure done, he is going to die. I also had to have the discussion with him, Dan. I said, if your heart stops in front of me right here, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to do everything we can to resuscitate you and try and get your heart back? And I said, if that were to happen, Dan, if I were to get you back, we're still in that position where we're in right now.
What did he say?
He said, I want to talk to my mom about that.
Finally, a bed opened up at the VA hospital in Houston. It was a helicopter ride away.
He goes, oh man, I promised myself after Afghanistan I would never be in a helicopter again. And he goes, oh well, I guess.
This is video of Daniel being airlifted to Houston, but it was too late.
They weren't able to do the procedure on him because it had been too long, and told me that they had seen air pockets in his intestines, which means that they were already starting to die off. So they told me that I had to make a decision, and I knew how Danny felt. He didn't want to be that way, so we were all in agreement that we had to let him go.
Roughly 24 hours after he walked into the emergency room, Daniel Wilkinson died at the age of 46.
I've never lost a patient from this diagnosis. Never. Because we know what needs to be done, and we know how to treat it, and we get them to where they need to go. I'm scared that the next patient that I see is someone that I can't get to where they need to get to. We are playing musical chairs with 100 people and 10 chairs. When the music stops, what happens? People from all over the world come to Houston to get medical care. And right now, Houston can't take care of patients from the next town over. That's the reality.
Dr. Kakli says if we weren't in this crisis, it would have taken him 30 minutes to get Daniel out the door. It took 7 hours. There are 102 people in the Houston area waiting for an ICU bed right now.
So that is really unfortunate and tragic, but it also touches on a few things. He's so close to all this great health care, but he can't access it. And because of the COVID crisis, only made worse by terrible governors such as Greg Abbott, have meant that people like this, who have an entirely treatable illness or disease, are dying because of the COVID crisis that doesn't need to still be going on. So whether you're Greg Abbott or another insufferable, selfish asshole in this crisis, the death of this man is on you. That's how bad the fourth wave is now. We're back to terrible levels. On August 25th, more than 100,000 Americans were hospitalized with COVID-19. And as Hillary Agro rightfully decides to point out and question, are there any lockdowns happening anywhere? Or is it just full raw dog Thunderdome, let's do this, everyone into the meat grinder now? Because yeah, what's Biden doing? What are a lot of governors doing? Everyone seems to have put the blinders on and nope, things are totally fine. Let's ignore that we're basically just as bad as the points when we first had the lockdown and everything. And we have assholes now actively fighting against mask mandates, protesting vaccine centers, taking horse dewormer. This is being prolonged by the worst people and for the worst and most avoidable reasons. As yet another person points out, the US is averaging over 1,000 COVID deaths per day again, a 69% increase since last week. We need mask mandates, lockdowns, stimulus, and Medicare for all. You know, those things would be great, but unfortunately you are not getting those because America is a capitalist hellscape. You need mask mandates? Unfortunately, many in the South and many Republicans are deciding to politicize this issue and saying, nope, we're gonna ban mask mandates. No, we can't have another lockdown. Think of the economy. Stimulus checks. Whoa, look, Jack, I know Biden already promised $2,000, but he kind of already delivered on that. He gave you $1,400 as a top up to the $600. And Medicare for all, well, that's a whole separate fight. I'm really beginning to think that this coronavirus pandemic is what ultimately starts the collapse of the United States. No one is being responsible in the United States when they absolutely need to be, because the Delta variant has basically made this pandemic round 2 electric boogaloo as far as the death and destruction is concerned. And yet, unfortunately, we're treating it as just, oh yeah, we've been through the rigmarole again. It's like, hey, you know, we've already been through the wave pool, so it's fine if we're on the beach when the tsunami hits. It's not! It is all so unfortunate, and yet it's happening. These assholes still going out and causing a ruckus in public, disturbing vaccination sites, harassing people in the streets and online, all while their elected leaders also choose to ignore the problem. People like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis and any other chuckle fuck who is politicizing a health crisis that is killing thousands of Americans again. All of you are terrible, despicable people. You have no place in responsible society because you've shown a total lack of responsibility. And it is so infuriating. And I know that this is unfortunately going to continue for a while. And I would love to wrap this video up here and say, and that's what's bothering me today, but we got more. In related pandemic news, and I'm probably going to clip the following from my upcoming and still in development liberal attack ad video. But there's been a bit of an interesting back and forth going on Twitter recently because, again, it's a federal election here in Canada. The Liberals called it. Right now they seem to be losing the polling war. And so, of course, the Liberal partisans are attacking the actual left-wing policy, even though the data shows that it's just people who had voted Liberal or supported Liberal last time, who are what we call red Tories and small c conservatives, are of course switching back to the Conservative Party. But this isn't stopping Liberal MPs and Liberal partisans and Liberal, party nominees from attacking various political leaders and information on the internet. So that brings us to the following. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP and the only mainstream left-of-center party that we actually have in Canada, tweeted this. Since coming to power, Trudeau has profited off of student debt to the tune of nearly $4 billion in interest payments. I would immediately remove interest from the federal student loans. What would it mean to you if interest were removed? Text and let me know. That was then easily, hooked on by this guy. So this guy, Ryan Turnbull, who's either like a nominee or he is the sitting MP for the region, had this to say. Completely 100% false, and it's not accidental because the Jagmeet Singh knows it's false. The federal government, under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, already waived the federal portion of interest on Canada's student loans, April 2021 to March 2023. See here. And then it provides a link to the National Student Loan Service Center, blah, blah, blah. But as someone who decided to do a little research responded to Mr. Turnbull, Trudeau has been in power since 2015, Ryan. From October 2015 until April 2021, when the moratorium on interest kicked in, the Fed has collected $4 billion in interest off student loans. Your government also ended the moratorium on student loan repayments in the middle of the second COVID wave. And that's true, which means technically Donald Trump for that moment was to the left of Justin Trudeau, which was weird as hell to see. Which again, vote liberal if you want real progress. No. Like, case in point, no. One of many cases we can make to never ever vote liberal. And then again, as this Twitter account goes on to further elaborate, it got even worse. The private company that Liberals outsource student loan collections to received federal subsidies through CEWS. The Fed literally paid a private company to keep collecting student loans rather than extend the moratorium for the duration of the pandemic. Now again, for those who are American and are watching, if you haven't seen some of my other videos that mention this and talk about it, the CEWS is the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. This was one of the many programs that was implemented during the pandemic, and first an idea of the NDP, and the expanded coverage of which was again encouraged by the NDP, that was intended to support workers and allow businesses to keep workers on during the pandemic, even if they weren't necessarily working. It was a way to try and retain workers and staff. Many companies have, of course, instead used this to give themselves bonuses and do stock buybacks. And so what this means for this instance of student debt, the Canadian Liberal government of Justin Trudeau made the decision to use taxpayer money to pay a private company to collect money from students that they didn't have. Again, during a pandemic. Yeah, no, that's real progressive, isn't it? What a fucking week. We've really learned nothing from this pandemic, have we? Our governments are still terrible, whether it's provincially or federally or at the state level in the states. Our neighbors, many of whom normally love to crow about community and personal responsibility, have shown a stunning lack of regard for both. And it just seems like everywhere you go, the dystopia just gets worse and worse. And yet here in Canada, once again, we have an election and someone, Team Red or Team Blue, is going to get in power again. And it's going to be the same dog and pony show that led to all this. And we all recognize that this fucking sucks. We all know that this is terrible and unsustainable and not good, and we want better. The polls say as much, and yet unfortunately, we still behave the same way. And out of everything that has been covered in this terrible, long, and dark week, that's what's bothering me today.